Hello and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys we will be doing another tournament after action report, and this time my Imperial Guard did quite well. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, I took my Imperial Guard into the Howling Dark, that is the competitive 140k meta, and I only lost one game out of 5 over the course of 2 days at a grand tournament. Not too shabby for the old balls and bayonets brigade. So this video is going to be all about that tournament, how I was able to get that result, all the circumstances and factors and all the good stuff, all the gubbins. We'll be going through it game by game, and we'll be taking a look at the Imperial Guard, their performance and how everything just went. Now, for those of you that haven't seen these videos before, what I tend to do is I do a bit of an introduction, I do a bit of a thank you to the organisers and all that kind of stuff. We then go into what I call the lay of the land, where I talk about how competitive was the event and what kind of event it was, and then we go into game by game the results and what happened and how the overall event went on. So and then of course we wrap it up with the good old summary. So that's what we'll be doing today, and without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Now, first thing I want to do is I want to say a massive thank you to the tournament organisers, Matt and the Northern Warlords, for hosting yet another fantastic event. If you have been following this channel for any length of time, you will know that I am part of the Northern Warlords Club and that I love going to the Northern Warlords events. They're really, really well done. They're always on the cutting edge of the meta. They always have good terrain. They're well organized. The times are sorted. There's good time for lunch. The venues are always great, and this was no exception. So I highly recommend anyone who is interested in taking a look at the competitive Warhammer scene to go along to a Northern Warlords event. They are good events. Now, to get into a bit more specifics, the event was hosted at Element Games, so of course I want to say a huge thank you to Element Games as well for being extremely good hosts. There was always good service behind the bar. They have a fantastically well stocked shop, and it was just, as always, Element Games. It's just, I always find that whilst it is an older sort of venue now and maybe looking a little bit tired here and there, there's a venerable dreadnought of an event. We go to Element, you always know you're going to have plenty of tables with the right battle mats and all the terrain and all that kind of good stuff, and it's going to be a decent venue, and they've got, like I said, good shop and all the good stuff. There's not much more you can expect from a nerd cave. An Element game is like the quintessential nerd cave, and of course they do have a shop which has a good discount on it. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but you'll see their name pop up on all sorts of channels and stores and whatnot, so go and check them out. They're absolutely fantastic. So massive thank you to Northern Warlords, massive thank you to Element Games, and yeah, that's just what I want to start off with there. So without further ado, let's dive straight into the lay of the land. What was this tournament like and how competitive was it? So the format of the event was, it was a team event, and it was teams of 4. And there was a pairing system where captains essentially got to sort of play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or play Magic the Gathering, to call it. And they had cards with their players' names on, and they put the cards face down, and they flipped them up, and then they were able to pair, I'll pick to go against this person, right, you pick to go against that person, and so on and so forth. And there was some dice rolls to help determine, who got to pick the first table, and then if you won that first table, then the people that lost that roll off could pick the middle 2 tables, and then you got the last table. So it was really well sort of organized, really good format for doing team events. It is the 3rd or 4th team event that I've been to in 9th edition, so I'm fairly familiar with this system now, and it was, it worked really, really well. It meant that not one side ever got to get all the perfect matchups that they wanted. It meant that there was always an advantage for, of course it's great to have that first matchup, but it doesn't matter if you get that second matchup, and likewise for tables and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really good format. It was a team event, and the people on my team, there was me with Imperial Guard. One of our players had Dark Elder, but it wasn't a thick city or anything like that. It was my brother who has his Dark Elder Reaver jet bike full witch cult army. So it's more of a fluffy list, but it's Dark Elder at the end of the day, so it's still very good, very competitive. And then we had Stu, who had his White Scars, all Vanguard veterans all the way. And then we had Tom, who had his Genestealer cult. And to be fair, it was his first event with Genestealer cult, and he'd had to submit. He was a late addition to our team because one of our other players dropped out, unfortunately. But I know Tom very well. He's actually organised a few events himself in the past. But he basically had a day to submit his list. So we had a little bit of a smorgasbord because we had Guard, which, are a lower tier faction. We had Cult, which are very good, but our player using them, it's his first outing with them. We had Dark Elder, but it wasn't a meth Dark Elder. And we had Marines, and it was a good Marines list and all that, but at the end of the day, it's still not Iron Hand Marines, is it? So it's not the most powerful thing. So our team, I would say, had a strong middle, just sort of middling amount of power. We weren't a super weak newbie team. We weren't a super powerful tryhard team. We had decent players with good experience, with decent lists who, by and large, knew what they were piloting. Like, I've used my Guard to death. John used a Dark Elder to death. Stuart's used his White Scars, non-stop for the last 9 months, 12 months. And Tom whilst not used this Genes to the Cult Codex, is a veteran Cult player. In fact, he's one of the first players I saw with the new Cult models, and his army actually made me want to get my Cult in all those years ago. So he knows what he's doing with Cult, even if he didn't know what he was doing with this particular codex. So not that he didn't know what to do, but you know what I mean. Like, he hadn't had a huge amount of practice with it. So that was our team, and then the rest of the lay of the land, I would say it was a real mix. Now, you guys know I've been to some events recently which have been real Shark Tanks, where every single player and every single list has been just horrendous. And I don't mean that horrendously bad. I mean horrendous to face off against. It's been Leviathan Hive Guard spam. It's been Iron Hands. It's been all the crazy, Dark Elder, Thick City, pre-nerf, all that kind of stuff. AdMech for days. The last few events I've been to have been a real Shark Tank. This one wasn't quite as harsh as that. There were several teams of people that obviously, they were the kind of people that like to come to a team event because it's a bit more fun, a bit more chill, and they didn't, they weren't really, not as cutthroat as maybe singles event kind of players. But there was no one there really who was using a super newbie sort of list. But what I would say is a lot of teams had a Guard player on it. And so, that's Guard is a lower tier faction. If it was a Shark Tank, you just wouldn't see them popping up. But I would say there must have been, half a dozen, if not more, Guard players at this event, which is kind of crazy because, for the last 9 months, I've kind of been flying solo at most of these events, and I've been flying the flag for the Guard faction. So it was certainly not a Shark Tank, but it certainly was not a seal clubbing fest either. It was just a nice, normal event. And I tell you what, it was damn refreshing. It was damn refreshing being able to go into game after game and just not be facing just the absolutely awful stuff. And I still faced some real strong shit, guys. Don't get me wrong, but it was nice for it not to be totally cutthroat. Now, in terms of the format of the event, 5 games, 2 days, 3 hours per round. Missions from the Chapter Approved 2021. So obviously that book is now gone and we've got Chapter Approved 2022, but this was the last event using Chapter Approved 2021. And it was 2,000 points. It was rule of 3 detachments. You could only have one faction per team. So if one person had White Scars, you couldn't have another person with Black Templars. Marines were Marines. That was what was considered. Likewise, you couldn't have a Guard player and a Scion player. So there you go. So that was basically the format of it, and it was good. It was really good. And in terms of terrain, what I'll do, guys, is I didn't take loads of pictures of each one of my games. I took a few pictures of the terrain, and so what I'll do is I'll throw those pictures up as we're going through this sort of lay of the land thing, and you can get an idea of what the terrain was like and what the what style the event was. So what you should be able to see from these pictures is that the terrain was proper. Okay, that's what I want to get across. Northern Warlords have made a huge amount of effort. This is, well, I say Northern Warlords. Matt, who runs the club, has made a huge effort to make sure that we have on-point terrain. The terrain is, it's really easy to put together and all that kind of stuff, but it is ruins, it is landside blocking, there's forests and all that kind of good stuff. So if you see like green squares and everything with little crosses on there, the forests do stick in, but most players take them out to start the game because they just get in the way of moving models around. So there's forests, there's craters, there's ruins, there's walls, there's containers, there's everything that you need for proper WTC terrain style maps, and that's what we use. And so hopefully what you can see from these pictures is that the terrain was really, really dense. It was proper 9th edition terrain. No planet bowling ball. There were firing lanes, but where there were firing lanes, there was dense terrain, so that you'd be shooting across it from a -1, and you had to sort of get over that halfway point to start, mitigating those modifiers for shooting. So there's lots of terrain, which made it good for assault armies. Reined in some of the, just blowing people off the table with shooting armies, kind of malarkey. And so that's where we are with the lay of the land. Semi-competitive event. Decent standing. There were some real hardcore teams. There were some nice normal teams, and the terrain was really good as well. So we'll leave that there for lay of the land. And what I'm going to do now is quickly go through what list I was taking. And this is going to be a quick one, guys, because if you've seen many of my videos before, you will have seen this list many, many times before. So we'll dive into a quick list overview now. So, quick list overview. Now, I'm going to be doing a quick list overview because I have used this list many times at the last few events that I've been to, and so I've covered it in detail before. But for those of you that haven't seen me go through this list before, if you've come across the video for the first time, do not worry. There will be a link at the end of this video where you can go and watch the full list breakdown and the strategies and the analysis behind it. So you can go and see that. So don't worry, that'll be at the end of this video. But we'll do a quick list overview now. Now, you can see here, just slight caveat, guys. This is a picture of the list, but it is I use slightly different models at the event. So if you see some pictures of my dudes at the event, you'll see that in this picture, I've got my green converted Cadian/Mordians, and in the pictures, I was using my Deathcore models. Very simply, it's just an aesthetic difference. The terms of the list, it was exactly the same. Basically, guys, I've been taking the plastic Mordians that I've put a lot of effort into converting and restoring to events, and they've got a little battered. I've had the arms break off. I've had just general wear and tear. So instead, I took out my Deathcore of Krieg and got that clear with the tournament organisers and everything, and they were like, yeah, that's fine. And actually, the Deathcore have got the same colour scheme as the tanks, so it actually looked better because everything was in that nice tan and silver colour scheme. So just a slight caveat there in case anyone's wondering, hey, how come he's got green guys in his army list picture, but then he's got tan guys, Deathcore guys in his battlefield picture? So that's just because it's an old picture. I didn't bother getting the men out and lining them up and everything when I had a picture of the list, essentially. Anyway, so that caveat out of the way, let's go through the list. So it is a battalion and it is a patrol. Everything is Cadian. I could have mixed and matched because this is, chapter 2022, but I always like keeping things as one detachment, one regiment, because it makes it easier when you're using the list. You don't have to remember multiple different rules, and it makes it faster when you're using a guard list where you're using 100 odd infantry and loads of vehicles. You need to have it streamlined. Otherwise, it might be more powerful if you use 2 different regiments, but it is also slower, and you have a time, you have a clock. So, that's a real world implication that you have to take into account. So I have it all as Cadian, I've got a patrol, and I've got a battalion. And I have, between those, I've got 3 tank commanders, 2 of them with Demolisher Cannon and triple heavy flamer. These are my bruiser brawler tanks. The Demolisher Cannon means that they can basically flatten anything that they come across, and the flamers have been so helpful because if anyone wants to try and tag those vehicles, they are going to get flamed in Overwatch, or I'm just going to be happily leaving my tank in combat, flaming away, flaming you off the hull. Every single time I think about taking the heavy flamers off these guys, I don't, because I take them to a tournament and those flamers are worth their weight in gold every single time. So I've got 2 Demolisher triple heavy flamer vehicles. I've then got another tank commander who has got Gatekeeper, which is the relic battle cannon for the Cadians. It's a flat damage 3 battle cannon. It also gets +1 to winning against chaos, but that didn't come up this event, unfortunately. And I've got triple heavy bolters. Now, again, every time I think about taking the heavy bolters off, I go to an event and I'm so glad that I brought them. Because a lot of people say heavy bolters aren't really worth it. But what I find is that you just need a little bit more chip damage. Just a little bit more chip damage to just finish off what the battle cannon doesn't quite do. And that came up time and time again. And also what I find is, it's just a nice bit of extra anti-horde. Lasguns aren't great at anti-horde. They can kind of do it. But sometimes you just need just fling a heavy bolter fist into someone. So that's why I put the heavy bolters on this tank and the next tank, which is Knight Commander Pask. That's the chap with the red beret there, who's the furthest right hand Lehman Russ. And he's got a regular battle cannon, and he's got triple heavy bolter as well. Now, he is actually, in funny sort of way, kind of the least powerful tank, and that's purely because even though he hits on 2s, he has only got damage D3. But what I found with Pask is he would often, and this is what I've used him for all the time now, he will always damage something. He never fails to like do nothing. He always does something. And so what I find is Pask will soften them up. Then I'll slap down overlapping fields of fire, and then the Manticores will tend to go in and finish them off. So Pask is still a very valuable thing. He sort of tees them up, and the rest of my army knocks them down. Speaking of Manticores, I've got 2 full payload Manticores with hull heavy bolters. You can't really say much about these. They fire indirect, and they're strength 10, flat damage 3. They're great. Obviously, post-chapter proof, this list will have gone up 20 points because of the 2 Manticores. And let me tell you, based on this event, they really didn't need to go up. Everyone shits themselves when they see the Manticores. And the Manticores are okay, but they never flatten something. Ever. They just do a decent-ish amount of damage between the 2 of them. You know, it takes 2 Manticores for them to do something. You know, so yeah, they really didn't need to go on 10 points. That's a different video. I've already covered a bit of a salt mine on that one. Then we've got the infantry. 2 blocks of conscripts, 1 of 30, 1 of 28, just because of points. And then we've got 6 squads of infantry, all bare bones. And then we've got the old man himself, Creed. And last but not least, we have the scout sentinels with multi-lasers. These are 105 points of insurance. Insurance against what you may say, Grey Knights, Genestealer Cult, Thousand Suns, anything that wants to get up in my face and try and, you know, deep strike down and just do horrible things to me. The scout sentinels are there to stop them. Now, funnily enough, they didn't really come up much this tournament because of the pairings that I kept getting, but that didn't matter so much because they actually ended up facing quite a lot of light infantry, and they're helpful. Yeah, they were pretty helpful. So yeah, those multi-lasers actually killed something, which was scary because multi-lasers never kill anything, right? So that's the list. General plan is I deploy everything as even with all this stuff, I deploy 95% of it out of line of sight, and I keep the long range tanks covering fire lanes. I use the Manticores to shoot anything that I want, and then I tend to put a Demolisher tank on each flank, and I almost use them as part of my screen. In terms of screening, often I will use a big, you know, the 2 squads of, if I'm facing a heavy assault army, the 2 squads of conscripts will form a human chain across my deployment zone and they'll absorb anything. If I'm not facing a quick assault army, I will actually tend to use the infantry squads and one of the squads of conscripts as reactive screening and keep one conscript blob a little bit further back, a little bit in reserve, so that I'm able to jump out with them, move with them. And let me tell you, having a block of when the enemy thinks they've cleared all your infantry out and suddenly 30 more conscripts come over the hill, that can and did help win me games. So that's just the way that I tend to run the army. Of course, the conscripts have been upgraded to Whiteshields, and so the list starts off on 8 CP. So there we go. That's the list. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the games. Now, my first game was against Iron Hands, and it was on the mission priority targets. That is where there are 5 objectives. There is some crazy diagonal sort of deployment zone going on, and it has everyone's favourite secondary mission objective, which is priority targets, which is basically where, unless you really mess it up, you're guaranteed to get 15 points on that, or at least guaranteed to get a lot of points on that, you know, throughout the game. So I, of course, you know, that's what I took priority targets. I'll just let you know now. And my opponent for that game was a really, really lovely chap called Stefan, and he had a really, really cool Iron Hands army. So straight away, in at the deep end. Straight away. So I was facing what I would consider to be a really, really impressive Iron Hands list. I thought that it was... I thought it was really powerful. It was a little bit different to what I was expecting, though, because a lot of people spam Contempt Dreadnoughts with Volkites. And Stefan hadn't done that. He had spammed Dreadnoughts, but he spammed Redemptor Dreadnoughts, which is pretty interesting. He had 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, each one with Storm Bolters, Rocket Bards, Plasma, all that kind of good stuff, Onslaught Gatling Cannon, all that kind of good stuff. And then he had a Relic Contempt Dreadnought, and it was like a Hero of the Chapter Dreadnought. So it was like a character Dreadnought, basically, which meant that it was bodyguard and all this kind of crazy stuff. So we had 4 Dreadnoughts. He had a bunch of troops. He had 3 lots of Incursors. And then he had 2 big blocks of Vanguard veterans. I think it was a big 10-man squad, but that's split into 5-man squads. And then he had some Eliminators, and he had a drop pod full of Grav and Multi-Melter Marines. So a pretty quintessential Iron Hands list. He's got Tech Marines and Primaris Lieutenants. He's got Dreadnoughts for days. He's got 4 deploying troops for days. And he's got a drop pod full of horrible heavy weapon goodness that he can use various stratagems and abilities to keep them in Devastated Doctrine when he wants and just have a great time. That's what he wants to do. That's what he's going to do. So my deployment against this was, well, I want to keep that drop pod back as long as possible, because if he can drop all these heavy weapons against my vehicles, I'm going to be having a bad time. And then my other thought was, I have way more infantry than him, and his dreadnoughts aren't that good in combat. So if I'm able to take ground relatively quickly and, you know, take advantage of all of the rough terrain and everything, that I might actually be able to essentially, if I blow all his infantry up, I might essentially be able to just out-objective him. And so my aim was just blow up his infantry, take all his infantry out of the game, and then hopefully he'll just have these 4 dreadnoughts stomping around, doing a lot of damage, but maybe I can tie them up in combat and whatnot with a few squads, and that might help do sort things out. So that was the plan. It kind of went to plan. It was a bit of a funny game, really. So this was probably my second hardest matchup of the event overall, and it was against a proper meta army, guys. And essentially what happened was I got I didn't get turn 1 in any games this event. I didn't get turn 1 once. I just got used to going second, okay, which is pretty crazy, right? Now in this first game, basically what happened was it went how you would expect it to. He marched forward, used his various +1 to hit buffs and whatnot on my vehicles, or sort of on his dreadnoughts, I should say, and he was just doing a lot of damage. Now, I actually did kill all of his troops and all of his Vanguard veterans, but that's all I killed. My dice were pretty poo this game, and so it was a real uphill battle, and my opponent was he never rolled less than a 5 on average. I think there was one time he rolled a 4, but the next dice he rolled a 6 for his macro plasma incinerators, and so he was just blowing up vehicles, man. It was just tough. Primaris plasma is just better than everyone else's plasma, pretty much. So he just had that reliability in the bag, so it just meant that he was, if I exposed a tank, it just died. And there was this one point when I fired Pask and Gatekeeper into a squad of Vanguard veterans and did a wound. Do you see what I mean? So it was a little bit squiffy. But even with that, my plan kind of came off, because I saw my rest of my team had some pretty iffy matchups as well. But I thought, as long as I can get some points out of this, because I should have said the format of the event wasn't like, it wasn't win or lose, as simple as that. It was based on sort of 20-0 point differential. I've covered this before in the tournament reports. It was based on point differential. So if you and your opponent were within 5 victory points of each other, that was considered a draw. If your opponent got 6 more victory points than you, then that was considered a minor loss, and your opponent got 11 points and you got 9 points. If he got 10 more victory points than you, he would get 12, and you would get 8 victory, sort of tournament points, and so on and so forth, for every 5-point difference. So it was a real hammer game. But what happened was I picked Stranglehold, and I picked Banners, and I picked priority targets. And so I was able to move a lot, because I just was picking up my opponent's troops as much as possible. So my opponent actually, for the first few turns, really struggled on his primary objectives. Really, he did struggle on that. But what ended up happening was he wasn't getting any 15s. But my opponent was able to max out his secondary. Essentially, he got Bring It Down. He took Priority, and he took Oath of Moment. And so what ended up happening is I was holding him for 3 full turns. So 3 full turns, I would actually say I was kind of ahead. My infantry screen was just holding. I'd pushed his drop pod back for 3 turns. For 2 turns, I'd pushed it back, and it was doing really, really well. And then just end of turn 3, beginning of turn 4, it just collapsed. I ran out of infantry. My tanks, all of which had been badly damaged by his plasma ended up just all just getting finished off. And so I just got absolutely blown away sort of turn 4 basically. And so what I had by the end of the game was Creed and two squads of and a squad of infantry basically sat on my home objective, and a couple of other scattered infantry here and there, and that was it. And my opponent still had all his dreadnoughts and his devastators. So I had literally just killed his vanguard, his vanguard veterans, and his other infantry and eliminators and whatnot. But I had been scoring points every single turn. Every single turn, I had maxed out pretty much every single point that I could, and I only dropped some points on banners. And so the end result was that my opponent scored 95 points out of 100, but I scored 91. And that meant that me and my opponent were within 5 points of each other. So as per the tournament rules, we got a draw. So that I took away as a huge personal victory. I have never ever beaten Iron Hands in 9th edition. I just can't do it. They're just so resilient to shooting that, you know, my army is designed for shooting, right? So this was kind of like my kryptonite, and this is the first time that I haven't lost to Iron Hands, and I got a draw. So that was a huge just personal victory for me. Obviously, and it was a draw overall. Unfortunately, the rest of my team got kind of rolled over, unfortunately. So I got the draw. I think the rest of my team, unfortunately, got losses. But that didn't matter because it's all about personal glory. but yeah, so that was really good. And my opponent, Stefan, was a joy to play against. We both said we started the tournament off right then. He actually said that without prompting from me. He was like, you know what, Tim, I hope the rest of my games go that well. That was fantastic, you know. And I said exactly the same thing to him. It was just great. We had loads of banter. You know, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. He was already knocking back the beers. It was all that good stuff. He was just a great player to play against. Absolute delight. So, Stefan, if you end up hearing this video, you know, absolutely loved the game against you. Thank you so much, man. It was just great. And it was, you know, I don't know how you did in the rest of the tournament, but I hope, you know, your list was fantastic, and I hope you did really well. So that was game 1. And I hadn't lost against a 9th edition codex, a meta 9th edition army, which happened, I believe, a similar list to this, where it came like 4th in the Nottingham GT. So, my little plucky guard list had gone up against one of the hardest things in the meta, and had come out with a draw. So I thought that boded quite well for the rest of the event. That was a good omen, guys. So it's not a win, but it's not a loss. It's a draw. And, you know, if it's not a loss, then it's a win, right? Anyway, so first game was a draw, which is good. Didn't lose the first game. And then we went straight into the second game. So after coming off against a draw against a pretty hard list, we went straight into the second game. And I had faced off against, you know, a lovely Knights player. And unfortunately, I forgot to take any picture of his army. But some of you may know this guy. He's actually a fellow YouTuber, and he actually was like, oh, hey man, I'm a big fan of your channel, Mordian Glory, all that kind of stuff. You inspired me to do my own YouTube stuff. And I was like, oh, hey, yeah, that's really cool. You know, I always love meeting fellow creators. But you know what was funny? I thought I recognized his voice. I was like, this guy's got a pretty distinct voice. Where have I heard this from before? And he went, oh yeah, I do my own little YouTube channel. And I was like, okay, yeah, what's it called? And he went, oh, it's only, you know, you might have heard of it. It's called Auspex Tactics. And I was like, no, just cover your kids' ears, fucking way. And I actually got to play against the man, the myth, the legend, Auspex Tactics. And let me tell you guys, he is a lovely guy. Absolutely fantastic opponent. And you know, we had an absolutely great game. We just, you know, it was actually a pretty chill game, to be honest. He had his knights. I recognise the colour scheme. He had his white and sort of orange colour scheme Imperial Knights. For those of you who don't know Auspex Tactics, he's probably like the biggest Warhammer channel out there at the moment, or at the very least the biggest, his biggest tactics channel. And so it was really nice to actually put a face to the name and all that kind of stuff, and you know, be able to finally see the disembodied voice behind the Auspex Tactics channel. But it was really good game, and he had his knights and everything. Now his list was a big knight with the big volcano lance and the plasma one. And it was a medium knight with the Gatling gun and the melter. And then it was just loads of baby knights. I think it was 6 baby knights overall. I think he had 4 lightning locks and 2 melter chainsword ones. So it's a pretty good list. And I've never faced the lightning lock ones before, but I've heard of them by reputation. And they're really, really, really good. Now the mission for this one was actually sweep and clear. So that's the one where you've got 5 objectives, table quarter deployment, and it's got the secondary direct assault. Now, hold my hands up here, guys. We got to the end of turn 2 before someone came up, one of the TOs came over and said, "What mission are you guys playing?" And we said, we said sweep and clear. That's what it says on the sheet. And he went, that's not this mission. That's for something else. And I was like, oh. Well, it was too late to go back at that point. So basically, guys, hands up. I'll let you know, I've played this mission twice. I played it today, first day, and then I played it the second day as well. So there you go. That was an honest mistake. I think everyone on our pod got that wrong. So it must have just been that I think some sheets had been left on the tables by accident by the TO, and they weren't meant to be there or something. But basically, yeah, our pod ended up playing the wrong mission. But it didn't matter at all in the end anyway. It's all about, as long as everyone's playing the same thing in the pod and we're all doing the same thing. The 40k missions are very similar. The terrain's identical and all that kind of stuff. So it's all good. Anyway, so just hold my hands up about that one, guys. So if you hear me, you don't often play the same mission twice in an event, but we did in this case because of that slight mistake that was made. But there we go. Now, like I said, me and Auspex had an absolutely fantastic game. And it kind of went how I expected it to go, because I could see him, but he couldn't see me. And so what I did, if you can see, I haven't got a picture of the game, but I have got a picture of the table. I was deployed in the bottom left-hand corner, and what I did is I put my 2 manticores there, and then one of my battle tanks I put Gatekeeper there. And he basically I could just see him. I could see his big knight and his medium knight wherever he went. And then I put the Demolisher tanks, Demolisher tank and Pask on the left flank, and a Demolisher tank on the right flank. And that was basically, he went flanking with his baby knights, but he got first turn, so I got the drop, but he moved, and then I was able to get the drop on him, unfortunately. So, yeah, it was kind of a tricky one. And yeah, I was shooting at -1 a lot of the time. Oh no, I wasn't, because dense terrain doesn't even affect knights. I think we checked that rule, and he said it didn't affect those knights. So I didn't know either way. So there we go. So it was a bit of a funny one, because the knights kept getting dropped on, and even with their new sort of found obsec and the baby knights, it didn't really matter too much. So because he picked to the last, and I killed 2 of his to the last units, which was one of the baby knight units and the medium knight. And that really scuppered him, because I took Stranglehold, I took Direct Assault, and I took Banners. And I basically, I got I almost maxed out points. I got 87 points by the end of the game. So it was a bit of an unfortunate one, because it wasn't a great matchup for him. Because a lot of my firepower just is AP -2. So I don't really care about his ion shields. I'm already putting him, he can rotate them if he wants, but he can only do that on one of them. I did end up killing his medium knight and all the baby knights, and all he had left was the big Castellan, which I almost got. I got it down to I think I had 12 wounds left or something. But yeah, unfortunately, he was really struggling in terms of movement, because obviously you have to be able to move your knights where they can go. And there was only really one way for his big knights to go. There was only just down the middle. Otherwise, he couldn't fit through any of the gaps. So his medium knights had to struggle down the middle of the board, getting blasted at by manticores and Gatekeeper, whilst his baby knights got picked apart by Pask and the 2 Demolisher tanks. So it was a brutal game. Brutal game. And in the end, the Guard actually ended up winning that one, which was I wasn't sure how it was going to go. Obviously, it's a dice game. My luck had been kind of cold in the first game, and it was a bit off all game, really. I think I've used all the luck up in my Krieg dice, because when I first got them, they were great, but they seem to have dropped off slightly. So I even bought some new dice to try, because my old ones were being a bit funny with me as well. So it was a great game. It was fairly back and forth, but I felt throughout the game the Guard had the advantage. And I think that is kind of just the nature of this. You know, the Knights are generally a shooting army. And what have I said about my list, guys? If you want to get into a firefight with it, go ahead, Sunshine. That's what I say about this list. You know, if this list is designed to win the firefight. And if I go up against someone else who likes shooting, I'm going to win the firefight 9 out of 10 times. You know, that's the that's what this list does. So it kind of went to plan. I had infantry hidden. I slingshot them out with move whenever I needed to. And I just picked apart his list one flank at a time, essentially. So it was a brutal game. I think, unfortunately, it wasn't a great one for the Knights, but a great in terms of list matchup. I don't think it was great for Auspex, but it was an absolutely fantastic game. And for me, I don't care if I'd lost this game or won this game. It was just great to finally meet, you know, one of the content creators that I follow quite closely. You know, I follow quite closely. So, you know, thank you. Huge thank you to Auspex Tactics for the game. It was a pleasure. The guy is an absolute gent, and I think we just had a super chill one. You know, we both knew exactly what each other armies could do and all that kind of good stuff. It was great. So after the game, and another important thing to say is I didn't lose game 2. You guys know I had that curse. How long did I have that goddamn curse? Well, I lost game 2 every tournament, no matter what I went to. 1 day, 2 days, doesn't matter how many days. Doesn't matter how many, you know, 3 games, 5 games, 6 games. Doesn't matter. I always lost game 2. Well, guess what? I didn't lose game 2 this time. And I didn't lose game 2 in the last event, I think, either. So maybe the curse is gone? I don't know. We're going to have to keep an eye on it, that goddamn curse. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little this one. So this was game 2, and then we're going to go straight into game 3, and that will be the end of day 1. So game 3 rolls around and I get the opportunity to do a guard versus guard game. And the best bit was that I knew the chap across the table, absolutely fantastic bloke called Kieran. Me and Kieran have actually seen each other across the gaming hall a few times. He's always running his guard at the event. I'm always running my guard at the event. Obviously, it's always us guard commanders have got to stick together. So we keep, you know, like I go up to him after a game, like, oh, how's it going, man? And if he's still going and all that kind of stuff. So absolutely fantastic that we've chatted loads. And now we actually got the chance to play each other, which was just great. And Kieran, if you watched this video, it was an absolutely fantastic game. It was probably my most enjoyable game of the whole event. It just felt right. It's like playing a game of bot action, if I'm going to be honest, guys. It just felt right. So massive thank you to Kieran. His list was actually very, very similar to my list. It was almost like my version 1.0 list, except for he wasn't running caging on everything. So Kieran's list was 3 tank commanders, 2 manticores. They were in a custom regiment detachment. They were in gunnery details, gunnery expert, spotter details, and then all his infantry was in a caging detachment. Now he had 3 blocks of infantry, several squads of 3 blocks of conscripts, several squads of infantry, and then he had several squads of scions as well. So it was an interesting. He actually outnumbered me, which felt so wrong on so many levels. I didn't really know how to handle it, and it definitely made a big difference. It made a huge difference to the end result of the game. Well, not end result of the game, but it made a huge difference in terms of how I had to play the game. Normally, I'm the one that has, blows on the tin whistle and is able to call on the next wave of reinforcements. But I was the one that had to husband my resources carefully this game, which was not a feeling I am familiar with. So it was about 150 infantry to my 120. And it was my 6 heavy hitters to his 5 heavy hitters. And then my Sentinels were kind of the equivalent to his Scions overall. He also had some weird variant Psychers and a Primaire Psyker and Inquisitor Coaches as well. So he had Psychic on me as well. So he definitely had more of a toolbox, whereas mine was more of a quintessential guard list, bodies and tanks and artillery. Now the mission was the good old-fashioned vital intelligence, 6 objectives, crazy diagonal deployment. You've got to hold 2 to get 5 points. So it was kind of an interesting mission, and we deployed pretty similarly. Everything was basically hidden out of line of sight as best as it could be. I've got a mission, I've got a map of the mission coming up. Actually, before I forget, I just want to say, you'll see a picture coming around, guys, of Kieran built, a scratch-built engine and crew compartment for his Leman Russ. That's insane. Absolutely insane. Like, super, super impressive. I absolutely loved it. So I've taken a picture of that, and you should see that one coming around in the cycle. Scratch-built engine and scratch-built crew internally. Just really, really cool. But anyway, back to the mission. Now, I can't remember exactly what secondaries that I picked. I'm pretty sure I had banners. I'm pretty sure I had stranglehold in this mission. And I think I went for no prisoners in the end. And I think Kieran went for a very similar sort of objectives as well. Now, as you can see you'll see in the deployment map that comes around, guys, I basically hit everything out of line of sight. Even those conscripts that look like they're out in the open, they're not really. It's actually kind of difficult to get firing lanes on them. And my plan was that I just wanted to just hold the objectives, and I wanted to win not only the long range firefight, but I wanted my infantry to be able to use their lasguns. This was a game where lasguns and volume of fire was going to be very, very important, because he actually has more lasguns than me. I have a lot of firepower, but he has more anti-infantry firepower, and he starts with more infantry. He has actually better infantry than me, because he has scions as well. And I have been on the receiving end of regular guard versus scions before in the past, and scions win that. It's crazy. They hit better. I don't get a save. They do get a save. All that kind of stuff. So it's actually a small group of scions can cut through guard like a hot knife through butter. So I've got to be really careful. Now, Kieran ends up getting this first turn, and he does what I thought he was going to do, which is, when you're playing against 99% of your opponents and you get the first turn as guard, you want to rush out there with your infantry, take the middle ground as quickly as possible, and just clog it up with bodies. So 90 conscripts come running out at me and take pretty much all the middle objectives bar the top right hand, top left from my perspective. And I was in the bottom left hand corner. So that was what my instinct had been as well. But if I'd got turn one, I wouldn't actually have done that, because that's your sort of standard plan, right? But this isn't a standard game. This is guard versus guard. And so running all those infantry out there, great, you take those middle objectives. Doesn't matter. What you've done there, and me and Kieran had a little chat about this afterwards, is you've run all your infantry out, and now I get the chance to get the drop on you. You don't want to do that. In this game, you almost want to throw, if you got turn one, you almost want to throw it. Let your opponent run out there and, expose his infantry, and then you can get first rank fire, second rank fire off on him. And that's basically what I did. Kieran started the Manticore artillery duel, and because he got turn one, he was going to win that. So I didn't even engage in the Manticore duel, really. I used all my firepower for clearing infantry. But what happened is he ran these infantry out, he buffed them up here and there with psychic powers and whatnot. And then when it came to my turn, obviously he had kind of Cadia stands, he had take cover and whatnot. But at the end of the day, on one flank of conscripts, I was able to get 40 infantry on the drop on those guys, and same again on the other flank of conscripts, and then my tanks were able to help out. And with a few lucky, and I actually ended up prosecuting a couple of bayonet charges turn one as well, and wrapping and trapping the remnants. And once the dust had settled, after the first rank fires, after the bayonet charges, after the artillery strikes and everything, I ended up wrapping and trapping just a couple from each squad after morale. And that was massive, because it meant that on the left-hand flank, or one of those flanks, he could desperate break out with one of them, but he couldn't desperate break out with both, which meant that one of my flanks was safe. And I had just equaled the infantry battle. Now he has lost his advantage in numbers. So now it's kind of, it's kind of crazy. On equal footing here now. So what ends up happening, guys, is it's very much, it feels like a World War I, wave upon wave, but both of us are on the attack. He had originally taken that middle ground, and then I did a counter-attack. And then his turn two, he blows my counter-attack back and re-secures the objectives. But then in my turn two, I blow him off the objectives, and I secure the objectives. And this goes back and forth, until the end of the game. But by the end of the game, I have lost one of my manticores and the majority of my infantry, to be fair. But my opponent has, I've got more troops around the battlefield, and my opponent has lost a couple of his vehicles and pretty much all his infantry, but one blob of conscripts. And so end result is it was actually quite a close game. I think the score was something like 80 something points to me and like 60 something points to Kieran. So it was not a huge difference in points at all. I think there was like 20 points difference in it. So it wasn't, I think the end result was like, it's like a 16-4 or 17-3. No, that's too high. It wasn't like that at all. It was like it's like a 14-6 or 13-7, that way around. So it was a really close game. There wasn't much in it at all. And I think the only mistake, I think the key mistake was that he threw away his infantry advantage. And I think if he hadn't done that, he could have, he could have forced me out. He could have taken that. He could have taken the game. So that was the one mistake that I think swung it in my favour. But a huge thank you for the game, Kieran. It was just great. And I felt like it felt like a really balanced game. Because it was guard v guard. It felt like bolt action. It just felt good. It felt right. So that was a lot of fun and a great way to end day one. And so at the end of that game, at the end of day one, I hadn't lost a game. I'd got a draw and 2 decent wins. And that was fine by me. I was on a 50% win rate. It didn't really matter what happened now. If I lost my last game, that didn't bother me. That didn't bother me at all. If I lost my last 2 games, it didn't bother me because I already had that 50% win rate. And I always go to guard with events and just think, if I can get 50%, that's all I care about. So anyway, that was that. And really fantastic way to end day one. But let's crack on and dive straight into day 2. Now, day 2 rolls around, and guess what? I get to play guard v guard again. So really funny thing, we actually had a gentleman's agreement with our team. We looked at their list and looked at our list, and we were like, hang on. They've got a guard player, a cult player, a Drukhari player, and a marine player. And we've got a guard player, a cult player, Drukhari player, and a marine player. Why don't we just do a mirror match and see, let's see who's the best out of each team. Who's the best guard player, who's the best cult player. And we actually jokingly, as our team, we sort of jokingly suggested that the evening before. And then when we met them on the table, that they were like, we thought exactly the same thing. Do you want to do it? And they actually proposed to us. And we were like, yeah, we were going to propose to you. So, because none of us were in the contention for top tables. We were, in terms of how the rounds had gone so far, our team had won 1 round but lost 2. So, overall, even though me personally am doing fairly well, overall, in terms of how the rest of the team's doing, we're getting sort of a win and a minor win, but getting 2 major losses, something like that. So we thought, it doesn't matter. We're not going to inflict anything on the bigger tables. Let's just do a mirror match, have a bit of fun. Everyone agrees it, not a problem whatsoever. So we ended up doing that, and I got to face another guard versus guard situation, which was great. It's like playing 2 games of bolt action in a weekend. You cannot say better than that. So what ended up happening is I faced off against just another great player. Every single player that I played at this event was great. I did not come across one dickhead. Now, because it sounds obvious, of course you're going to say nice things about your opponent. No, if I face off against a knobhead, I won't, at the very least, I won't say nice things about them. I'm very likely to say how it is. I faced off against a knobhead. Now, I can say, just slightly off from tangent here, guys, I didn't face any knobheads. Every single one of my opponents this tournament was nice, was gentlemanly, was great, fantastic banter. We bought drink. I'd buy drink for them, they buy drink for me. It was just every single opponent was great, and that's just one thing I want you to take away from this event. So if it sounds like I'm saying the same thing, oh, my opponent was fantastic, he was. Every single one of them was fantastic. So went into this game, and it was kind of funny because Tom, who was my opponent, so it was like the battle of the Tim v Tom, who's got the better 3-letter name beginning with a T and ending in an M, was a newer guard player who hadn't actually seen the channel. So I was like, shameless, selfless plug in there, go and check the channel out, all that kind of stuff. But what was really interesting is I actually was able to, it was really good because I was able to help him along with his rules quite a lot. So there was one time when he flew his Valkyrie in and just rolled 2d6 with random shots. I was like, no, mate. You get blast. It's blast. He's like, oh, are you sure? But just check it. Check your codex. It'll say blast. And then, oh, it does. So, and there was times when he'd forget, he'd forget an order here and there, and he had sounds in his list, and he would be like, I'm going to use bring it down against your vehicle, and I was like, don't use bring it down. Use elimination protocol, sanction, all that kind of stuff, because it didn't matter to me whether I, you know, won or lost in this game. He's a newer player, and my instinct was just, you know, let's get him having a great game at his event and learning his army and trying things out and all that good stuff. So I thought it was a really, really good game. It was really chill. I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy playing games against, you know, guard players. I always enjoy helping out my fellow guard players and all that kind of stuff. And it also meant that we were able to speed along the game really, really quickly because, you know, he would just trust me. Now, I never, just to be clear, I never influenced any of the decisions he made. He made all his own tactical decisions. It was just when he was like, oh, what's the strength of this weapon? I'd just be like, it's this. What order can I do here? It's this, do this one. Like, he was going to do forwards to the Emperor on a unit with melter guns, and I was like, you don't need to. They already get to advance and fire. Forwards to the Emperor doesn't cancel out the -1, so just go for it, and then use a different order on them. So all that kind of stuff, that's how I helped him, guys. So I just want to be clear, because I don't want anyone thinking that I misled him or anything like that. I did not. So it was another great game, and this time we played the mission that I've already, you know, that I said we already played already, the one with bloody direct assault, you know, sweep and clear. So we played that one again, and it was just a lot. And I took basically the same objective: stranglehold, direct assault, and I took you know, banners, and then Tom took no prisoners. He took Rod, and he took Engage, which I think were very much picks of a player that is playing, you know, has got a plan with his list, but it's not the right picks against this list because you're never going to get into my deployment zone because I've got so much infantry. I'm just going to spread you out. He's all, you know, his scions were Landum Lions, and his infantry and everything else was Catachan, and he had a single Manticore, a single tank commander, a bit of infantry, Hades breaching drill with veterans, which I told him you can put command squads in there, by the way, so do that instead of putting a squad of veterans. And then he had a bunch of scions and a couple of Torx primes, one Punchy prime, one Daka prime, and he had a Valkyrie as well with command squads in, scion command squads in. So I knew his list really, really, really well, and of course that's a bit of an advantage for me. Now, how the game ended up going was it was actually, you know, really, really close until turn 3. It was really, and that's not, I don't want anyone taking that as like a backhanded criticism or anything. It was genuinely, I thought Tom had it. I thought he had it, and I thought, bloody hell, I'm going to have to give the channel to him, aren't I? I'm going to have to give him the bloody Mordian Glory channel. This guy clearly knows what he's doing than me. But what it was it was his scions. So his scion, you know, he got turn 1, of course. And he, you know, did some significant damage to him. He had that Punisher Cannon, he had that Daka Prime, which, you know, great against my infantry hordes. But I had a lot more infantry than him. And so what happened was, and he had Bulgrin and Inquisitor Hector Rex, which were a great combat unit. And so what ended up happening was, turn 1, he did some damage to me, but then I was able to fight him back a bit. But the terrain was kind of blocking the line of sight for a lot of my stuff. Turn 2, he brings his first wave of scions in, does a lot of damage to my infantry, but I'm able to fight him back a bit. But I still haven't got quite all the lines of sight that I want. I'm just moving my vehicles a bit by bit. Infantry screen, I'm playing it World War I style, you know, slow, steady advance. I'm taking, you know, moving infantry onto the centre as and when I need to. I'm using Shattered Remnants of squads to keep the Deep Strikers back. But overall, he's actually kind of equaling me in the firefight. But that's because I've just not got the angles that I want yet. And turn 3, he does a real hammer blow. He can't hold off his scions anymore. He brings everything in, all his scions, his drill, everything, and he's a real Hail Mary, and it just, you know, he does a lot of damage to me. Actually clears out most of my remaining infantry. But that was kind of everything he had, and he hadn't touched my tank commanders really, or he hadn't touched any of my heavy hitters at that point. Not for lack of trying, but, you know, between a combination of jury rigging and relentless, I was able to just keep everyone on the level in terms of brackets and everything. So what ended up happening was his turn 3, he goes all in, and my turn 3, I cripple him. I cripple his army. And I think by the end of his turn 3, he has a tank commander, 3 Bulgrins, and Hector Rex left, and 1 or 2 scions here and there. I just flatten him. And it was just what it was. It's this quintessential problem with scions is they will come in, and if they do what they need to do, it's fantastic. But if they don't, they will die. And it's why I often say you need either all scions or all guard. Because if you don't have all guard, you don't really have the bodies you need to do what you need to do in terms of objective placement. You don't have that long range bombardment firepower that you need. But if you go all Scion, if you don't have enough Scion, but then at the same time, you don't have enough Scions to do that hammer blow turn 2, that hammer blow turn 3, and then for that momentum to just carry you forward into turn 4, turn 5 victory. You just don't have quite enough of each, which is why I always say you need to go all of one or all of the other, by and large. And that really, I'm kind of glad that was played out in the game. I'm obviously, feel a bit, guilty. I always feel guilty for winning games. I've got a goddamn guilty complex. But what I would say is that it was good that my sort of theory and that what I have, found for myself ended up playing out in that game. So it was a really good game. And honestly, like I said, I really thought Tom had it. After his turn 3, I thought, bloody hell. And then I just turned around and I had 30 conscripts in reserve, which just flooded out of the bat, not reserve, just in the lines that blocking terrain, flooded them out, and just picked up almost everything. All the sounds were exposed, and I just picked up everything between heavy flamers, Demolisher cannons, heavy bolters, battle cannons, manticles. Just picked up everything that I could pick up, and it was just a brutal display of firepower because I finally had moved into all the positions that I wanted. I finally had all the angles that I wanted, and it was brutal. So massive thank you to Tom for the game. Apologies, Tom, I can't hand over the channel to you. That was the agreement of our game. If you won, you'd get it. But massive thank you. And just, it was a really good game. And hopefully you are watching this video. And I just want to say you played really, really well, mate. Definitely just keep plugging away. Tweak your list, distill that list down, and you'll be smashing games. You'll be going 3-2. You'll be going 2-1-2 at your events, which is as best as you can hope for it with Guard. You might even be going like 4-1 at events. So just keep plugging away, mate. You'll be doing great. So that was game number 4, and I've not lost a game yet. I haven't lost a game yet. Holy shit, guys! I'm like, no way. Like, I'm not exactly. I'm not 4-0. But I'm also kind of 4-0 because I've just not dropped a game yet. Do you know what I mean? I've just not dropped one. So anyway, guys, let's get in to game number 5. So game 2, day 2, game 5 overall rolls around, and at this point I'm like, you know what? I actually don't care what happens on my last game. Maybe I could go undefeated, maybe I couldn't. But I actually don't care about that. And what I realise is it gets to the end of the game and I'm like, well, hang on. I've faced Iron Hands, which was a 9th edition thing. But apart from that, I've faced, Knights and I've faced Guard twice. But I haven't really, haven't really tasted the latest meta yet. Iron Hands is pretty, it's always been around, right? But what I like to do with these tournament reviews is I like to keep on top of the meta. And so I got the opportunity to face the worst of the meta, the most horrendous shit possible. And I knew it was going to mean I was probably going to lose my game. I could have taken on Grey Knights, guys. And I had my Sentinels there for anti-Grey Knight stuff. I could have done it. But I wanted to face the nasty shit. And so I got the chance to pick my last game. I got that chance. And I chose to take on Crusher Stampede. I chose to take on the Tyranid Menace. And let me tell you, it was a gnarly one. And I'm just going to say it now, guys. I didn't win. I did not win. But I did get some points. And I didn't get tabled. So overall, moral victory and certainly a learning experience. And also, it was just, you just got to face that stuff. You got to face it so you can talk about it and come back about it. Now, I will be doing a video on Crusher Stampede, next week and whatnot. But just to give you a bit of a heads up, guys. I'm not going to go through it blow by blow. I'm not going to go through it detail by detail. I'm just going to go through, just like I've done with the rest of the videos. I'll just do a quick overview of the game, really. So the mission was overrun. Kind of apt because the Tyranids kind of overran me. And I can't really remember what objectives I took. I think I took Stranglehold, I took Banners, and then I took Bring It Down. I took Bring It Down against him. And my opponent took Stranglehold, no prisoners, and something else. Which, Engage? I think he took Engage. So, interestingly, what my opponent had was he had 2 barbed Hierodules with the big guns. Impossible to kill, motherfuckers. He took 2 Dimacarians, which are horrible. He took 2 big-ass squads of Hive Guard, 2 squads of Warriors, Hive Time, and a Malanthrope, and then some other little bits. He just took Crusher Stampede, guys. And it was horrible. And basically, I had one chance. Also, the terrain was awful. It definitely wasn't meant to be well, it wasn't awful, but the layout was not great for the map. It was meant to be the way it was, but it was just, couldn't really hide very much. And so as a result, it was a bit like whoever got turn 1 would have a big advantage. And the thing is, I needed turn 1. I could see his stuff. He didn't have his catalyst buffs up and stuff like that. I could see Hive Guard plain as day with Gatekeeper. I could see Hive Guard plain as day with Pask. I could see Dimacarians and the ass end of a barbed hero duel with demolishers. I could see it. If I got turn 1, I could possibly pick up all his Hive Guard and maybe one of the big creatures as well. I was ready to, because it's bloody Overrun, guys. You look at that map, it's Dawn of War, it's short. I can drive goddamn demolishers forward. I can goddamn blow them to pieces with, every single big gun would have been in range, locked and loaded, ready to rock and roll. If I got turn 1. But if you've been paying attention to this video, you'll know that I didn't get turn 1 in any of my games. And I didn't get turn 1 in this game either. And the moment I even rolled okay, like I rolled like a 4, that's a decent chance to get turn 1. And my opponent just went and rolled a bloody 6, and I was like, right. I said my opponent, lovely guy by the way, softly spoken chap. I think he was, maybe a bit tired or whatever the first time, but by the end of the game, he'd come out of his shell. We're having a great time, bantering away, absolutely fantastic. And again, didn't have a bad opponent, absolutely love it. I think he was a little bit maybe weirded out by how much fun I was having losing to Crusher Stampede, because let me tell you guys, I just embraced the narrative in this game, and I still came out pretty well. But I charged with bayonets, Dimacarians, and it just because I could, and because also it tied them up because all Leviathan. So I genuinely had a great time because I was just stress testing my list against the worst shit. That's what I like to do. So I think, but by the end of it, he was great. He was getting into all the fixed bayonets and all that kind of stuff. I was, role playing a little bit. It was great. But I said to my opponent when he got that turn 1, I went, absolutely honestly, mate, this is now your game to lose. Okay, it's your game to lose. You've got this in the bag if you just do everything right. And he was like, oh, maybe not. I was like, no, trust me. Just trust me. I reckon you've got this. But I really gave it my all. Don't think I was defeated, guys. But Crusher Stampede is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. You hit them with a Demolisher Cannon, they're on a 5-up save, reducing damage by 1 on everything. You get Gatekeeper through, it reduces everything by 1. Even if you put within half range -1 AP, I think Cadia stands on it. Doesn't matter. They don't care. They do not care. You slam your Manticore missiles into those Hive Guard. They don't care. They've got a 5-up invuln. They don't care. You can't flatten them. I'd want to put, I didn't do it, my opponent was very nice and he'd tell me, I'd be like, I'm going to put Cadia stands on that so I can just go straight through your arm on the little guys. And he went, nope, still going to 5-up. Awful. And they're making it, if you've seen the leaks from today, guys, they're making it even more powerful. All the big monsters are getting +3 wounds. It's just going to be horrendous. So the game kind of went as predicted, but highlights of it was, firstly, my opponent only got Stranglehold twice. I literally denied him. Second highlight was I blew the fuck out of all of his warriors and nearly all of his Hive Guard, and I did manage to take off some to the last points from him as well, which was great. And then the main event though was the fact that he had a Dimacarian come down one flank, and I just kind of tactically redeployed. I was like, I'm just gonna just leave that Dimacarian alone. I don't need to engage if I don't want to. So his first Dimacarian didn't get into the game until turn 4. So I just ran turn 3 basically, because I just ran away from it, fed it an infantry squad that I didn't care about. And his other Dimacarian, this is what I mean, it was close, man. Guys, it was close. I really fought as hard as my little heart could, but it was just a foregone conclusion. He broke through my lines turn 4, and there's not much I could do about it. But turns 1, 2, and 3, and most of turn 4, I actually held up one of his Daimacharians with 2 blocks of conscripts. And I was also able to tag one of his big bowed hero jewels as well. I just couldn't kill that much. I killed his warriors, most of it, his hive guard, and one of the Daimacharians. But the 2 barbed hero jewels, like his hive tyrant and his other Daimacharian, just ran around, just ate everything. And he was getting really lucky. Like at one point, he would roll his feel no pains as Daimacharian, and I'd make him roll 13 feel no pains, and he only had like 4 wounds left on it, and he made 10, so it lived, so he could heal it. And even a 1 wound Daimacharian can still munch through like a unit of Guardsmen or something. So it doesn't really matter. So there you go. That was it, really, guys. I didn't get tabled. Last man standing was Creed, who was last man standing, facing down a Daimacharian in combat, but he lived. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, all the men around him died, but Creed lived, and so it was a really, really fun game. Crush Stampede is horrendous, guys. It is so durable. It's more durable than Iron Hands. That was and I felt like I killed nothing in the Iron Hands game. I felt like I killed less than nothing in that goddamn Crusher Stampede game. So great way to end the event, though. Top and tailed the event with 2 meta watches. 2 sort of litmus tests on the meta, which is great, and had a fantastic middle of the event. And overall, guys, that was the only game that I lost. So can't complain too much about that, can you? Like that's not bad going with the old guard. So that's it. So we'll do a quick summary here now, and then that'll be it for today's video. So that was it, end of day 2, and we had only dropped 1 game, and it was just against the most meta-winning broken shit, So overall, really happy with how the event went. I was able to get a draw against a horrible Iron Hands list. I was able to meet one of the people that I follow, a fellow creator, Auspex Tactics, who's an absolutely fantastic guy. I was able to beat him too, which is always great. And then more seriously though, beat Nids. Nids have always been a bit of a gatekeeper when it comes to the competitive scene. Played 2 guard on guard games. Was able to win both of those. Unfortunately, didn't have to give the channel away, which was great. And then was able to go up against a just fantastic, player who had Crusher Stampede. And it really, really good learning experience. So in terms of the overall event, we learned lots about the current meta. Iron Hands are fantastic, Crusher Stampede is fantastic, and we were able to have some fun games as well against some other 8th edition armies. So it was a really, really fun event. Allowed me to scratch all of my itches in terms of playing fun games and playing hardcore Shark Tank games. It was really good for all of that stuff. So once again, I want to say massive thank you to Element Games. I want to say massive thank you to Northern Warlords because it was a really, really fun event. In terms of what's going to be coming up next, guys, in terms of lessons learned, I suppose, the list that I have, it just plays itself at this point. I'm really familiar with it. This must be, I think I worked out overall with this list that we're looking at 20 competitive games with only this 1 loss in this tournament, 1 loss in the last tournament, and 2 losses in the tournament before that. So if you include practice games as well, I've only lost 4 out of 20 games with this list, which is pretty big. I think it's something like 12 wins, 4 draws, 4 losses. So it's kind of like 12 wins out of 20 games. It's pretty good. That's like a 60% win rate. And then if you add those other things, it's like a 70% win rate. I think this event, if you take into account that the draw is half a game and I won 3.5 out of 5, that's a 70% win rate with this list, which kind of pans out across overall, because if I face the nastiest meta stuff, I get about a 50% win rate. If I face normal stuff, I can get about a 70% win rate. So this list is pretty strong. It is good. It has weaknesses. It's starting though. I can see it with the Iron Hands game and with the Crush Stampede game. It's starting to fall behind though, and that's really the big concern that I've got at the moment with things like Tau coming out, Elder coming out, Tyranids coming out. Guard are clearly back at the bus, back of the line, and I can just see us falling further and further behind. When I was facing off against other 8th edition armies in this event, it was fine. The game felt balanced and the list felt strong. When I was facing off against 9th edition stuff, it was like I was playing with both arms tied behind my back. I couldn't really keep up. It was only through sort of experience and just goddamn grit that I was able to really get anything out of those games, you know, anything at all. But it was very much, you know, the Ironside game was a draw, but I had like 11 dudes left, and my opponent's army had 70% of its models left. You know, I lost the Kush Stampede game, I had one model left, and my opponent still probably had 60% of his army left. You know, I'm winning or getting points or doing okay on victory points, but in terms of actual damage dealt and received, the Guard is just, we're behind, man. We are way, way behind. And that is becoming more and more evident. So hopefully, I suspect that that will kind of be the high point for that list and the high point for my regular Guard. We shall see if it continues, but I suspect it's going to be getting only tougher from now on. Maybe I'll flip back to my Scions for a bit. I do enjoy playing my Scions. Maybe I'll flip back to the pure infantry. I don't know. But we've played, I think, 3 or 4 events back to back with that Guard list now. 3 events and loads of practice games with it. And it's done me proud. And what I'd like to say is the regular, you know, just signing off on this. Good old regular Cadians. Good old regular tanks, infantry, and it's a bit of artillery. You know, we've gone to events and we've gone down, as I always like to say with Guard, it's, you know, sometimes when it gets to that 7th edition style meta like we are now in 9th, sometimes you can't expect to get a win. Sometimes you can be happy with going down swinging. Sometimes you can be happy with giving the enemy a bloody nose on the way down and making them, you know, as long as you can walk away with your head held high and your opponent with it gives you a little bit of respect, and they don't just, you know, they thought it was going to be a walkover and they had to fight for it. And if you can make your opponent work for their victory, then you've got the moral victory there. And that's where I think Guard's going to be. I think in a couple months' time, we'll be back where we were in 7th. You know, we'll be aiming for those moral victories. We'll be aiming for those, you know, give them a bloody nose kind of things. But that's where I think we'll be. Anyway, guys, really hope you enjoyed this video. In terms of what's coming up in the future, like I said, I've got a couple more events. I've got Adepticon. I've got another, you know, in March. I've got another event in May. Not sure what else is going to be happening. I don't think there'll be many more events after that. But that's where we're at with those events. And of course, there'll be loads of more action content coming up as well. I've almost finished my Germans. I've got my American paratroopers planned out. So that's where we're going to be with those events too. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. And of course, I'll see you guys next time.